Welcome to the Lumenverse. Tonight, we take a visit to a quiet cottage, nestled deep within a long-forgotten glen. In the darkness of the night, the fireflies shine like tiny dancing stars, their soft light illuminating the way. And within the cottage, an old lantern keeper tends to his duties, carefully caring for magical lights that glimmer in the night. Long after the rest of the world has slipped into slumber, if you find comfort and peace in gentle narratives that lull you into tranquility and help you unwind, please consider showing your support by liking, subscribing, and activating the bell to embark on a new journey with us every week. Now, gently breathe in deeply and allowing your weary mind to find respite. Softly close your eyes, allowing the world to fade away as you surrender to the soothing glow of the lantern keeper's cottage. There exists a deeply secluded place in the forest, so far removed from the world, even the most detailed maps seem to forget its existence. Under the shelter of golden leaves and shimmering silver moss, a winding path meanders along, its surroundings veiled in the comforting glow of fireflies. These magical creatures rise every twilight and fade as the sun breaks the horizon. Each evening, an elderly man navigates the path with the help of his trusty wooden cane, carrying a weather-worn lantern that miraculously never burns out. The man's name is Bran, affectionately known as the Lantern Keeper. His steps are unhurried, every movement a reflection of a lifetime of wisdom and contemplation. Behind him, miniature lights ignite, one by one, creating a trail of miniature beacons that seem to dance in anticipation of his passing. It almost seems as if the forest itself is slowly awakening, greeting his presence with a gentle flicker of light. Bran's humble residence is not a sight of opulence. Nestled snugly at the base of a small hill is a round stone cottage, its exterior adorned with a curtain of ivy that crawls up the walls and climbs the length of the smoke-blackened chimney. Within the cozy space, everything exudes warmth. From the flickering flames in the stone hearth, to the soft glow of lanterns, to the rich, rustic oak floor. Upon the crackling hearth, a copper kettle gently hums, its lid rising and falling with the rhythm of steam. Shelves laden with leather-bound books lean at precarious angles, creating a cozy chaos of knowledge and memory. A sleepy white cat named Mallow curls up by the fire, her ears twitching to the crackling of the glowing logs. Bran hangs his cloak on a worn hook, sets the glowing lantern down on an intricately carved oak table, and begins to hum an old, unfamiliar tune, a melody long forgotten by the world, yet still holding a trace of gentle magic. On this particular evening, an unexpected turn of events unfolds. Mallow, the white cat, suddenly lifts her head, her ears pricked, as if she has sensed something. A gentle but steady rapping sound reverberates through the quiet cottage, carrying a hint of purpose and uncertainty. Bran rises slowly from his chair, the glowing lantern in hand, to answer the door. A young girl stands there shivering slightly, her tangled hair framing her face in a chaotic mess, and her eyes, like polished river stones, betraying feelings of nervousness and anticipation. The girl nods silently, still standing in the doorway, the chill of the night clinging to her. Bran's expression holds curiosity rather than annoyance when she speaks. "Your light?" The young girl nods, her voice soft and timid. "It was there when I slept, but it's gone now." Bran responds with a gentle smile. "Then it seems we should help you find it." He retrieves a smaller but equally turn from behind the door. "Come in, child. Let's warm you up before we set out. The forest will wait." After a cup of warm tea and a couple of stories by the fire, Lyra wraps herself in a shawl, watching silently as Bran prepares his sturdy boots and walking stick. Together, they step back out into the cold night. The forest envelops them in a cocoon of comforting sounds. The whispering of owls, the hush of leaves rustling against each other, the distant, soothing sound of water tumbling over stones. Bran raises his lantern high, and the fireflies flutter toward him, floating gracefully through the darkness like a constellation in slow motion. Bran's quietly as they walk, his voice blending with the night. They remember, even when we forget. They continue down the path, the moss beneath them shimmering with a soft luminescence. Lyra's lantern flares suddenly, then settles into a steady, pale glow. Her eyes widen with joy. "It's coming back." Bran merely nods in response. Light is never truly lost. He glances down at her, his eyes warm in the lantern's glow. Just waiting for someone to look for it. They return to the cottage just as the first hint of dawn begins to paint the sky in the east. Mallow is fast asleep in the chair, her breathing steady and peaceful. Bran carefully puts Lyra's now glowing lantern where it shines with the gentle glow of a resting firefly. Lyra crawls under the quilt on the guest bed, her eyes beginning to close. Just before she falls asleep, she turns to Bran and whispers, "Thank you for helping me find it." Bran, in the process of reducing the level of illumination in the cottage, pauses at the door. A warm, genuine smile lights his features as he responds, his words carrying a profound depth. No one leaves the Lumenverse without their light. The cottage descends into a peaceful silence. The fire in the hearth softens to a low flicker. One by one, the lanterns dim, until only the gentle glow of Lyra's lantern still lingers like a watchful guardian through the night. Sleep well, dear traveler. Allow your light to be found, and your presence be remembered with kindness. May the protection of the forest encompass you, and the warmth of the lantern keeper lead you safely through the night as it gives way to the gentle light of dawn. Years passed, each night finding the path of fireflies aglow with a faint, steady glimmer, and the kettle in Bran's cottage still humming softly. Mallow, the aging cat, spent more of her time sleeping than wandering, but then, one evening, as the first stars made their appearance in the darkening skies, the air itself seemed to shift, as though the forest had taken a deep breath. It was not an abrupt or thunderous change, just a subtle, discernible shift, like the forest itself had recollected something long forgotten. Bran, now carrying the weight of age, stood at the doorway of his round blue cottage. In the distance, the trail stretched on, disappearing into the misty shroud that veiled the forest. Slowly, a figure approached, silhouetted against the fading light. Not a child this time, but a strong-looking woman with wise eyes and a determined stride. She drew closer. The woman was clad in a cloak of tanned leather, a satchel slung over one shoulder, and her every move spoke of the confidence that came from traversing a lengthy journey. Bran's aged face softened at the sight of her. "Lyra," she smiled, the same slightly crooked smile she had when she was a young girl. "I lost my light again," she confessed, her voice slightly breathless. "But I remembered the way back." As she entered the cozy space, memories flooded back. The same comforting familiarity surrounded her. The same copper kettle hung gently over the hearth. The same old bookshelf with its worn leather spines was positioned by the window, now sporting a patch of silver in her fur, stretched out with a grumpy yawn. Lyra shed her cloak and sat down near the fire, a quiet silence settling over her for a while before she spoke again. "Out there, I forgot who I was," she confessed. "I hardened, and sharpened." The quiet night was interrupted by the sound of soft raindrops drumming against the window pane. Lyra stood by the window, mesmerized by the rivulets of water racing down the glass, each one following its own path. Her words filled the air, her voice soft and contemplative. "I used to believe that light had to be bright to matter, that to be good you had to shine louder than the darkness." Bran listened silently, adding a few petals of chamomile to their tea, its warm scent filling the room. The rain continued its steady rhythm, a comforting background sound that accompanied their silent companionship. They sipped their tea, the steam swirling up from their cups like wisps of smoke. Suddenly, Bran extended a hand, holding out a small, faded book to Lyra. The cover was covered in moss-green leather, its edges worn and fragile, the spine creased with wear. She took the book, a question in her gaze. "What is this?" As she opened the book and began to flip through it, old memories washed over her, the faded drawings preserved within the pages, the dried leaves used as bookmarks, and her own childish handwriting scrawled across one of the pages, a declaration from her younger self. "When I grow up, I will help lost things find their way." Her smile reflected her rediscovered sense of purpose, her eyes now shining brightly, like the lanterns that lined the path leading to Bran's cottage. Before dawn broke, Lyra quietly rose from her spot near the fire. Outside, the rain had ceased, leaving a hushed quiet in its place. Moonlight reflected gently off the puddles on the ground. The path was alive with a soft, glowing procession as the fireflies danced in the night. Bran emerged slowly, his gait slightly slowed by the aid of his cane. He approached Lyra, his voice a gentle nudge. "Will you walk it again?" She responded with a determined nod. "This time, I think I'll actually stay." A surprised look flickered across Bran's face, his brow lifting with a mixture of curiosity and understanding. Lyra's declaration left him momentarily silent, but then, his voice softening into a tone of deep pride, he replied, "Then the cottage is yours." His final words hung heavy in the still night, echoing the profound shift that had just taken place. With that, the mantle of guidance was being passed on, from Bran to Lyra, a new light to carry the fire of the Lumenverse forward. Lyra's eyes widened with a mix of realization and melancholy. She blinked, her voice just above a whisper as she asked. "But where will you go?" Bran responded with a soft smile. "Somewhere warm, a place where lanterns never need tending and old cats grow young again." The following morning, Bran departed quietly, carrying only his trusty walking stick, a pouch of tea, and a note left pinned to the mantle. He set out on a new journey. The words read, "May the lights you keep always find their way home." Lyra stood on the threshold of her renewed sanctuary. The forest whispered a quiet hum, a gentle affirmation, as the lanterns lining the pathway blinked to life. The forest itself seemed to exhale a collective breath of recognition. With her own lantern freshly polished, Lyra stepped onto the path, no longer a guest or a seeker, but the new guardian of the Lumenverse. The days slipped by in a tranquil rhythm. Lyra took meticulous care of the lanterns, mending their glass, trimming their wicks, and murmuring softly to the fireflies that danced within each soft flicker. In the quiet moments, she recorded her musings in the green leather book, preserving her insights and memories. Mallow, the silver-patched cat, remained a faithful companion, finding contentment in the warmth of sunbeams or the gentle glow of firelight, often dozing lazily in the cozy corners of the cottage. The embrace of a misty dawn, the air thick with the earthy scents of damp pine and damp moss. A shift in the atmosphere occurred. A timid knock echoed through the cottage, a gentle yet hesitant rapping, as if the knocker weren't certain of their own resolve. Lyra's eyes widened as she opened the door, finding a young boy standing on the doorstep. His disheveled hair, dampened clothing, and the bag slung over his shoulder suggested a journey tinged with uncertainty and lost bearings. The young boy, his voice little more than a mumbled greeting, shuffled a bit on the doorstep. Once inside, his silence stretched on, his gaze lingering on the kettle as it brewed on the fire. Occasionally, he reached out to scratch behind Mallow's ears. His avoidance of eye contact wasn't due to shyness alone. It was a weight of grief, like a cloak heavy with anguish. Lyra placed a bowl of steaming stew by him and waited, offering her silent presence. Lyra settled into a seat opposite the boy, her eyes fixed on his face. "Who said you weren't brave?" she asked, her tone gentle and inquisitive. His response was a non-committal shrug, a quiet everyone. In the soft silence that followed, Lyra stirred her tea, the spoon moving softly through the liquid. She recalled her own past, her voice a soft, intimate whisper. "The first time I came here, I was lost too." Lyra's voice was soft, filled with gentle conviction. "I thought bravery meant never feeling afraid, but I've learned that true bravery is to keep moving forward, even amid fears." The next day, Lyra led him down the trail with unhurried steps, pausing at the listening rock. The round, moss-covered stone held a secret of its own, the soft-throated voice of the woods. The boy knelt beside the rock, his voice a faint confession. "I miss her." He waited, a beat, hoping for a reply. His voice trembled a little as he confessed, "I miss her. I'm afraid the sound of her voice will fade, and I don't want to forget it." Feeling his need, Lyra approached the stone. She placed her hand on it and whispered something intimate, just for the wind to hear. The boy leaned in to listen, and the stone vibrated softly, like a hum from deep within. For a moment, a faint, gentle memory washed over him. Not a full record of the past, but a fleeting echo like a lullaby remembered in fragments. That evening, Lyra placed a small yet significant lantern on the pathway. It was blue in hue, its glass adorned with a silver ribbon. The boy watched as Lyra set it down, a faint smile on her lips. "This one's yours," she said, letting the words settle. "To carry or leave behind, it is your choice." The boy picked it up, feeling its weight in his hands. He looked up at Lyra, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "It doesn't feel heavy," he confessed, a note of wonder in his voice. Lyra chuckled softly, and in a gentle voice she replied, "And neither are you any ordinary child." Lyra responded with a gentle smile, her voice filled with understanding. "It truly isn't," she affirmed, her gaze steady and sincere. "But this lantern will always light your path when you feel lost." Listened intently, his expression thoughtful. As he stepped back onto the path, he turned to Lyra one last time. "You're not like other grown-ups," he declared. Lyra's smile widened. "And you're far from your average child," she echoed, her voice warm with a touch of wisdom. Under the starlit sky, Lyra settled herself by the window, the soft glow of the interior lanterns casting long shadows around her. The pages of the green book lay open in front of her, a silent companion. In the quiet solitude of the moment, she jotted down the reflections that flitted through her mind, her pen moving with a gentle grace. As her thoughts took form, the words spoke of the true nature of bravery, Not the absence of fear, but the return of hope. It was the quiet boy, she wrote, the one carrying a lantern, which had finally ignited. Rest, weary traveler. Allow your breath to descend into a stethum and your thoughts to find respite in the quiet corners of your mind. You are not lost. A lantern always awaits. A keeper always stands ready. There is always a flicker of light to begin anew. And as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Kael and Ellerin approached a vast, untamed woodlawn as the forest of hollow stars. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their silver bark gleaming in the gathering twilight. The air was filled with an otherworldly mist, and the leaves of the trees glimmered with a brilliant blue hue. The forest was ancient, untouched by time, and exuded an air of profound peace. Kael felt uneasy, the weight of the forest's presence heavy on his shoulders. This place, it feels like it's alive. Ellerin placed a comforting hand on Kael's shoulder. It is, he replied softly. These woods remember things the world has long since forgotten. The further they ventured into the forest, the more the world shifted. The chirping of birds died out, replaced by a profound stillness. The wind grew calm, and only the soft crunch of moss beneath their feet remained, a constant, comforting rhythm. Ellerin reached out with his hand, summoning a glowing orb of warm, pulsing light. It hovered above his palm, its soft illumination a contrast to the gathering darkness. Moving deeper into the forest, their breaths came in soft, measured inhalations, and their voices were barely a whisper. The glowing orb cast a gentle warmth upon the path ahead, its soft, rhythmic flickering guiding them through the forest's depths. Kael turned to Ellerin, curiosity in his eyes. I thought this place was sealed, he said. Why are we here? Ellerin looked at him with a solemn expression. It was, he replied. But there's something stirring in the roots, a long-forgotten sadness, and perhaps a truth that you need to witness. Kael felt a chill run down his spine, but he steeled himself, determined to understand what mysteries lay hidden within the forest of hollow stars. Finally, after hours of slow and careful navigation, Kael and Ellerin stumbled upon a glade bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. The silver beams filtering through the canopy spilled onto the glade, illuminating the clearing in a silvery, dreamlike shimmer. The moss beneath their feet became a lush carpet, rustling softly with each step. At the heart of the glade stood a broken statue, a winged woman with outstretched hands. Flowers bloomed from cracks in the stone, and soft glowing motes floated around her like a celestial haze. Ellerin knelt before the statue, gently brushing away the moss that clung to its base. The stone was cold and smooth under his fingertips, and he traced the lines of the wings reverently. Ellerin's voice was a soft whisper, his gaze fixed on the broken statue before them. She was a guardian, he said quietly, his fingers tracing the cracks in the stone. Of dreams, of peace. Kael stood beside him, his eyes never leaving the statue. What happened? Ellerin's head lifted slowly, his gaze meeting Kael's. The world forgot to believe. They set up camp near the grove, the soft crackling of the fire filling the air. The flames were an ethereal blue, casting a cozy, calming glow. Kael sat close to the fire, his gaze flickering over to Ellerin. You used to be like me, didn't you? He asked, intrigued. Ellerin chuckled softly, the sound rich and warm. I was more reckless, he replied. Kael couldn't help but tease. I don't see how that's possible. That night, Kael's subconscious carried him back to the forest, but it was different now. The stars were not lost in infinite blackness, but hung like shimmering lanterns from the trees above. The trees hummed a low, almost melodious song, their branches reaching out. The path was no longer dark. A strange, warm light lit the way, beckoning him forward. As Kael arrived at the heart of the forest, he found himself standing before a mirror-still lake. But instead of his own reflection, he saw the image of an older version of himself, clad in a cloak similar to Ellerin's, with a strength and wisdom in his eyes. The reflection's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Instead, a voice echoed in Kael's mind. To protect the light, you must carry the dark. The first light of dawn began to break over the horizon as Kael stirred awake. The fire was still crackling gently, and Ellerin was watching the changing sky. You saw it, Ellerin spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Kael nodded silently, his mind filled with the vivid dream. Ellerin's eyes met Kael's. Then it is time. But it was different now. The stars were not lost in infinite blackness, but hung like shimmering lanterns from the trees above. The trees hummed a low, almost melodious song, their branches reaching out. The path was no longer dark. A strange, warm light lit the way, beckoning him forward. As Kale arrived at the heart of the forest, he found himself standing before a mirror-still lake. But instead of his own reflection, he saw the image of an older version of himself, clad in a cloak similar to Ellorin's, with a strength and wisdom in his eyes. The reflection's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Instead, a voice echoed in Kale's mind. To protect the light, you must carry the dark. The first light of dawn began to break over the horizon as Kale stirred awake. The fire was still crackling gently, and Ellarin was watching the changing sky. You saw it, Ellarin spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Kale nodded silently, his mind filled with the vivid dream. Ellarin's eyes met Kale's. Then it is time. The massive trees, standing like ancient sentinels, opened their branches to reveal a well, surrounded by broken runes and flowers that glimmered faintly blue in the pale light. Ellarin's voice cut through the silence. The well of remembering. It holds the oldest truths, but it only reveals them to those who come with open hearts. Kale took a hesitant step forward, his eyes fixed on the shimmering water. As Kale peered into the well, fragments of scenes flashed before his eyes. He saw a younger Ellarin, fighting side by side with a warrior in gleaming golden armor, their movements a symphony of power and grace. Then the image shifted. The crystal towers crumbled, consumed by darkness. And then he saw himself, a child with eyes like stars, sheltered within a cradle in a forest grove. Kale's mind struggled to process the images, the weight of responsibility sinking in. Not as a knight, he finally spoke, his voice resolute, but as a bridge between two ages, between what was and what could be again. Ellarin watched him with a mix of sadness and understanding, his gaze heavy. Kale looked to Ellarin, his mind reeling. You knew, from the start? The sorcerer nodded. I knew the moment I found you, Kale. The forest, it called to you, just as it called to me. So many years ago. A moment of silence passed between them, the air rich with the scent of earth and the quiet whisper of the wind through the leaves. The stars twinkled gently in the night sky, reflected in the still water. Leaving the forest behind them, Kale noticed a change in the environment. The mist seemed to part before them, the air more breathable and the path more clear. The stars in the heavens burned more clearly. Ellarin's steps, though no slower, felt measured and more deliberate. He walked close to Kale, his hand gently touching the young knight's shoulder occasionally, not in need of support, but in a quiet display of affection. As they walked, Ellarin spoke softly, You will surpass me one day. A smile tugged at Kale's lips. Not yet, Ellarin nodded in agreement, his face betraying a hint of melancholy. No, he echoed, not yet. As they walked, the mist slowly obscured the forest behind them, hiding the forest of hollow stars from view, as if it had never been there at all. Though neither spoke the words aloud, both felt the difference. Kale's eyes were different now, reflecting an inner calm that had not been there before, and Ellarin, for the first time in many years, felt a warmth in his heart that had seemed lost to him. Quiet settled around them, wrapping them in a comfortable silence. The sun was still low on the horizon, its golden light illuminating the land with a soft early morning glow. The grass at their feet shone with dew, and their shadows stretched like ink stains across the hillside. They turned and looked back at the forest, the morning mist swirling around the ancient trees and the thick, silvery fog. It looked as it had for ages, still, silent, and untouched. They walked in silence, the only sounds the soft crunch of their boots on the ground and the whisper of the morning breeze. Ellarin walked carefully, his old body betraying no sign of fatigue. Kale kept close, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his sword. It was a familiar habit but not a fearful one. Finally, after a long pause, Kale said something. Ellarin. Ellarin stopped walking, his eyes fixed on the old stone standing in the grass. He placed a hand on it, running his fingers over the worn runes. Kale came to a halt beside him, waiting. The words from their conversation at the well still echoed in his mind, and the questions remained. After a moment, Ellarin finally spoke. Yes, it was the truth. The child was you. Ellarin's gaze stayed fixed on the stone, the runes carved into its surface almost like a memory etched in rock. He murmured, I knew it all. Kale's heart beat faster, realization sinking in. And you watched over me, he said, guarded me. Kale absorbed Ellarin's words, the wind carrying them gently across the hillside. You suspected, he echoed, but you waited. The morning held a hushed stillness, as if the very world was waiting with them. As the day wound down, Kale and Ellerin entered the village of Karen's Hollow, where houses were nestled into the curve of the hillside and windmills dotted the skyline. Children darted through the gardens, laughter and shouts filling the quiet air. The windows glowed with soft candlelight, and the scent of wood fires and cooking spices hung heavily. Kale noticed the villagers watching them, their eyes filled with curiosity and respect. As they settled into the cozy inn by the orchard, Kale posed a question. "Is it always like this?" Ellerin chuckled softly, his eyes distant yet amused. "When you live long enough," he answered, "everyone becomes either someone you helped or someone you've lost." The room was small, cozy, the bed soft and inviting. Moonlight streamed through the open windows, carrying the soft sounds of the night. As the fire burned low, Kale turned to Ellerin, who was seated in a worn armchair. Kale studied Ellerin's face in the flickering candlelight, the pieces of the puzzle slowly fitting together in his mind. He spoke slowly, a hint of realization in his voice. You didn't bring me to the forest just to show me my past. You brought me so I could decide who I'll become." Ellerin's eyes seemed to dance in the candlelight, their gaze steady and almost knowing. "You're learning," he repeated softly, his voice carrying a touch of approval. In his dream, Kale found himself standing on a glass bridge. Stars gleamed above him, and below, the forest spread in an endless carpet of darkness. In the distance, a strange tower loomed, its windows lit by a soft, golden light. From the darkness stepped a woman draped in shadows, her voice at once unfamiliar and hauntingly familiar. "You are not yet whole," she said, her eyes never leaving Kale's face. "Yet you are no longer lost." She extended her hand, presenting Kale with a small silver key. It was shaped like a star, with a subtle glow within it. She leaned closer, her voice lowering to a hushed murmur. "When the sky burns, you must return." Kale's dreams quickly faded, replaced by the sight of the small room and the soft glow of the fireplace. Ellerin was still sitting in the armchair, his gaze fixed on the night sky beyond his window. He spoke quietly, his voice barely disturbing the silence. "You saw her, didn't you?" Kale turned to Ellerin, the dream still vivid in his mind. He asked quietly. Ellerin looked away from the sky, his eyes fixed on Kale with an intense but somehow affectionate gaze. "A piece of what's to come," he replied, his voice soft yet full of significance, "and a reminder of what still needs to be healed." The new day began with the soft light of dawn. The air was sweet with the smell of blooming blossoms, and the voices of birds echoed through the forest. The road, once dusty and quiet, was now covered by a soft carpet of soft, loamy soil. The trees themselves were adorned with young leaves, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of new life. Kale discussed his dreams with Ellerin as they walked, and the old sorcerer listened intently, occasionally asking gentle questions to fill in the pieces of the puzzle. The room was small, cozy, the bed soft and inviting. Moonlight streamed through the open windows, carrying the soft sounds of the night. As the fire burned low, Kale turned to Ellerin, who was seated in a worn armchair. Kale studied Ellerin's face in the flickering candlelight, the pieces of the puzzle slowly fitting together in his mind. He spoke slowly, a hint of realization in his voice. You didn't bring me to the forest just to show me my past. You brought me so I could decide who I'll become." Ellerin's eyes seemed to dance in the candlelight, their gaze steady and almost knowing. "You're learning," he repeated softly, his voice carrying a touch of approval. In his dream, Kale found himself standing on a glass bridge. Stars gleamed above him, and below, the forest spread in an endless carpet of darkness. In the distance, a strange tower loomed, its windows lit by a soft, golden light. From the darkness stepped a woman draped in shadows, her voice at once unfamiliar and hauntingly familiar. "You are not yet whole," she said, her eyes never leaving Kale's face. "Yet you are no longer lost." She extended her hand, presenting Kale with a small silver key. It was shaped like a star, with a subtle glow within it. She leaned closer, her voice lowering to a hushed murmur. "When the sky burns, you must return." Kale's dreams quickly faded, replaced by the sight of the small room and the soft glow of the fireplace. Ellerin was still sitting in the armchair, his gaze fixed on the night sky beyond his window. He spoke quietly, his voice barely disturbing the silence. "You saw her, didn't you?" Kale turned to Ellerin, the dream still vivid in his mind. He asked quietly. Ellerin looked away from the sky, his eyes fixed on Kale with an intense but somehow affectionate gaze. "A piece of what's to come," he replied, his voice soft yet full of significance, "and a reminder of what still needs to be healed." The new day began with the soft light of dawn. The air was sweet with the smell of blooming blossoms, and the voices of birds echoed through the forest. The road, once dusty and quiet, was now covered by a soft carpet of soft, loamy soil. The trees themselves were adorned with young leaves, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of new life. Kael discussed his dreams with Elerin as they walked, and the old sorcerer listened intently, occasionally asking gentle questions to fill in the pieces of the puzzle. The stream's surface was as still as glass, reflecting Kael's face with a clarity he'd never seen before. Here, the water itself seemed to listen, its soft rush seeming to say, "Tell me your thoughts." Kael studied himself, the reflection strangely calm and quiet. After a moment he turned away from it, a soft smile on his face. "It listened," he said quietly. Elerin, who had been quietly watching, raised one eyebrow. "And what did it hear?" Though Kael and Elerin knew not what the road ahead held, they felt a strange sense of anticipation. There was no fear, only a quiet expectation. This was not merely about destiny, or about some ancient flame waiting to be rediscovered. This was different. The road stretched out before them like a winding, shadowy path, long and unpredictable. They walked in comfortable silence, their footsteps echoing softly in the stillness of the early morning. The sun beat gently at their backs, the sky a quiet sea of blue above. Elerin walked with the quiet, graceful stride of someone who has seen 1,000 days much like this. Kael followed beside him, his heart filled with a strange mix of anticipation and quiet calm. The days blended one into the next. The sun rose and set. Kael and Elerin continued traveling eastward, their feet treading softly over a landscape dotted with hidden wonders. One morning, as the first hints of the coming dawn colored the sky, Kael looked at Elerin, the question burning in his heart. "You said a journey isn't about reaching the end," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the older man's face, "but rather noticing when it's changed. How do you know when that moment comes?" They made camp for the night at the edge of an ancient cliff, and Kael's eyes widened as he beheld the landscape spread out before him. A vast basin, stretching out for miles in every direction, was bathed in a gentle glow. Elerin's voice was hushed as he spoke, and Kael turned to find the old man standing beside him, gazing out over the darkened landscape. "This was once a city," he said quietly. "Long before there were kings or empires, they called it the shell of the world." Kael knelt on the stone, his fingers tracing the surface of the ancient stone. "It feels alive," he said softly, his touch gentle. Elerin stood beside him, his eyes fixed on the pulsing, glowing crater. He replied in a barely audible whisper, "Everything remembers, even if we forget." They rested under the stars that night, the deep, quiet hum of the crater a steady, ancient rhythm. In his dreams, Kael heard the wind whispering, carrying with it the soft echoes of longing and loss. The morning came soft and quiet, cloaked in a thick white blanket of fog. They moved cautiously, guided by the sound of running water and the calls of waking birds. In the mist ahead of them, shapes flickered and shifted, not frightening, but watchful. Eerily silent and graceful beings, shrouded by shadows, glided through the thick haze. Their faces were hidden, their robes flowing around them like the fog itself. Kael's hand went instinctively to his sword at the sight of the creatures, but Elerin's steady hand on his wrist held him back. "They are the mist shepherds," the older man murmured, his voice gentle but firm, "guardians of the in-between." One of the shepherds, its faceless hood turned toward them, slowly stepped forward, its long-fingered hand extended. In its palm lay a shimmering, silvery object, a memory. A vision appeared, a memory like rippling moonlight. Kael saw a younger version of himself, bruised and broken and alone in the woods, on the day Elerin had discovered him. Kael's voice shook as he whispered, "Wish," Elerin replied softly, "to remind you what it means to be found." The memory faded, and the shepherds faded with it, melting back into the mist like ghosts. The vision faded, the shepherds melting back into the fog, silent and ephemeral, stayed rooted in place, his eyes still fixed on the spot where they had been. And then, for the first time in a long while, silent tears rolled down his cheeks. It was not a cry of pain or bitterness. Rather, it was a release of emotions he hadn't realized he had been holding back, a moment of profound understanding. As the day turned to evening, they came across an old chapel, its stone walls crumbling and its stained glass windows broken. Moss and vines grew along its decaying sides. Within the walls of the abandoned building, they found a fire pit, benches rotted away by time, and words carved into the stone above the altar. "Let those who are lost light the fire and be warmed." Elerin's hand lifted, and without a word, he cast a spell. The fire pit flared to life, its golden flames dancing with shadows, casting long, shifting shapes on the walls. Kale sat beside the glowing fire, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "I'm afraid of who I'll have to become," he admitted softly, the words barely audible in the quiet chapel. Ellerin sat down beside him, the light from the fire painting his face in warm hues. For a moment, he said nothing. Finally, he added another log to the flames. "You should be," he replied quietly, "for power without fear forgets what it was meant for." Kale's gaze fixed on Ellerin, his question hanging in the air. "Did you fear it too?" "Every day," Ellerin replied. They stayed by the comforting fire, watching as the flames slowly reduced to glowing embers. Even sleep found them there, curling around them like a warm blanket. The night's silence broken only by the occasional whisper of the wind through the broken glass windows. And in the stillness of the night, they found unexpected peace. As dawn broke, they departed the crumbling chapel, leaving the quiet night behind. Ahead of them, a narrow, twisting path led upward toward a distant peak that vanished into the clouds. "The star spire," Ellerin murmured, his gaze fixed on the mountain, "where fate ends or begins." The journey up the mountain was silent, the sound of their footsteps the only sound on the winding trail. On their way up the mountain, no dangers appeared. There was only the wind, the endless sky, and the thoughts that filled their minds. At the peak, a tall, smooth black stone stood alone against the sky. Ellerin touched it gently, his eyes closed. Slowly, he began to kneel. Kale watched, frozen, his heart tightening in his chest. "Ellerin?" he called out, his voice carrying like a whisper. Ellerin's voice held nothing but peace and acceptance. "This is where I remain," he said quietly, "where the road ends for me." Kale stepped forward, his heart heavy with grief and anger. "No," he said, his voice betraying his pain. "You said we would finish this together." Ellerin's smile was gentle, his eyes filled with the warmth of 1,000 memories. "We did," he replied. "But this is not your end. For you, it is your beginning." The black stone pulsated gently, then, once more, began to fade. No pain, no fear, like the soft light of the stars in a fading night. The final words from his lips were like a gentle breeze carrying the weight of 1,000 years, 1,000 tears, 1,000 hopes. "Protect the light." The silence was deafening, the weight of loss heavy on Kale's shoulders. Ellerin's final words echoed in the air, "Be what I could not, and more." The wind rustled through the trees, and the sky was vast and endless. Kale stood alone, but his heart was not broken. Now, it was aflame with purpose. Kale slowly walked down the mountain, the black cloak of Ellerin draped around him. In his chest, the light of the star spire burned softly, casting a warm glow. He moved at a steady pace, in no rush to be anywhere. But as he walked, something changed. The birds sang more clearly and the rivers glimmered like liquid silver as they wound toward the sea. The world was becoming more vibrant, more alive, as if the very air was changing, as if it knew. As the magic within him settled, it was not like a flame, but rather like roots. He retraced the steps he and Ellerin had taken, back to the path through the forests, to the hollow and the woods that had seen them both. He finally came to stand at the edge of the forest, where the fog had once shrouded the ancient trees from sight. And there he knelt, his voice soft and sincere as he whispered his words of gratitude. "Thank you." The wind gently carried his words, catching them like feathers upon its current and letting them drift into the trees. And from somewhere distant, from places only accessible to the realm of the magical, a soft, quiet voice echoed like a whisper across the water. "You are ready." As the whispered words echoed through the trees, an air of comfort and acceptance filled the forest. The stars sparkled down like silent witnesses, remembering every moment. In the gentle hush of the night, the road continued to stretch out, unrushed and open. Now,